Welcome back to the 5-Star Counsel podcast. This is producer Bobby here, and I am, of course, joined by our host, John Strohmeyer. So John and I thought it would be an interesting idea to, every 10 episodes or so, kind of look back. And since we have these great guests and we have so many different topics, we thought it would be a good idea to take some time to recap these great ideas, solidify these lessons and takeaways from the previous 9 episodes, and ground them in a little bit of real life application, ways that we're implementing these things, and connecting them to each other to give a little more context.
Right. And Bobby, that's the thing. There's so much in here and we don't want to lose any of this. And coming back, there are ideas that came up to us as we were going over some of these, as we were going through these episodes, just some ideas that it's like, oh, I don't think I mentioned this in the episode. So we're coming back with the benefit of some thought time. And really, let's pull it all back together. Obviously, the old episodes are there. You can get the full experience if you want it. But here's just the quick overview and some of our main takeaways.
Right. So we'll start with a quick quote from each episode, and we'll dive into kind of the basics of what we talked about and our quick takeaways. So let's start with episode 70, Nailing Your Interview and Hiring Process with Molly McGrath.
Most people are running from, not running to. If they want to be able, so often my ads will start with, when I'm inboxing people in recruiting versus having people apply to an ad, my subject line says, "Are you happy and being treated well?" And when people when people reply to that, I love it when people say to me, "I love where I work. Thank you for offering this opportunity to me," but they're not even interested in speaking to us. That's when I want to go hunt down that law firm and say, "I don't know what you're doing, but up level it and keep doing what you're doing," because your people won't even talk to a recruiter because you've obviously created a very amazing culture.
And so what I liked about this and what I really take away from Molly's interview again is no long process. We don't want the interview process to be difficult for potential candidates. We don't want it to be difficult for employees. It's the same thing we kind of keep coming back to. You're making the process easy. Here, when we think about interviewing and hiring, we want it to be easy for people to come and work for us, to see that they're a good fit for us. What we don't want is a situation that I unfortunately had to experience from one of my jobs, where I think I went through 7 or 8 interviews. Each time I was talking to different people, it didn't feel like they knew anything about me other than they had looked at my resume for about 10 seconds before they had walked in. It was a frustrating experience.
And it's them showing their true colors right off the bat. You know what kind of place you're going to be working at.
Yeah, it's something that looking back, it's painfully obvious. That's what I was getting hired on for and exactly what I was going to have to deal with going through and working there. And now, part of what we do here when we're hiring people is making sure they know, like, here's your next step. Your first step is to, submit your resume and cover letter and make sure that you're doing these certain things. We spell it out. It's not hidden, but it's still surprising how many people don't put in things like, please tell us your favorite ice cream flavor. Even, no, it doesn't have any bearing on what you're doing. Yeah. Sure, people do figure out it's kind of a game, and maybe they're not being completely honest. The point is, can they read plain written English and follow instructions? We need to know that before we go any further, regardless of the job you're being hired for.
Yeah, and I remember her talking about how that first phone call she takes, she maxes it out at like 5 minutes or a couple minutes or whatever it is. You can get those quick qualifiers out of the way right off the bat.
Exactly. And it's something to delegate. It doesn't necessarily have to be you.
Mm-hmm. And man, there were just an astonishing number of tips about hiring and the job posting process in this interview. It was it's worth a re-listen if you're going to be hiring anyone anytime soon. Next up is episode 71, Training Your Staff for Tech Proficiency with Alicia Pierre.
Once we get that new shining toy, you're going to be another 6 months figuring out how it works, right? So you don't even win really sometimes with that. And once you get that new tool, I think it's important to have an expert involved in it from the beginning. It's just like when we start driving, we don't just get in the car. That's a powerful tool. But yet we still get driving lessons, we still get licensed in it and so forth. So I think it's the same concept when we're getting these powerful tools, whether it's Basecamp, Google Workspace, we need to have an expert and some training involved in it so that we know that they're using it appropriately.
Again, it's going to sound the same over and over, but you're not going to be able to expect your people to show up at your door, start working for you, and know everything. Doesn't matter where they came from, what they were doing before. You're going to have to train them, and technology is no different. Places I've worked expected, oh, well, the people younger than 30 know how to work all this tech stuff. They don't. You've got to train everybody on what to do, and so they're not just, we didn't really get into Word specialty knowledge, and I'm a power user of Word. We're not going to get into that, but you can't expect somebody to come in and know how to use Word if they've never been trained on it. They're going to do the silly things where they'll hit return until they get to the next page instead of using the page break, which is much faster and does what you want and makes it easier. And so again, you can't assume technology is always going to be easy for everybody. You want to make sure they know what's there and how to use it.
Right. And we talk a lot about service to our employees and the kind of cascading effect that has to service for your clients. And this is a perfect example of that. This is it, training them to use tech correctly saves them time, makes things easier for them, makes things easier for your clients.
Management is the flip side of client service. It's how you take care of your people and make it easy for them to get work done.
Next up is episode 73, The 8 Layers of Legal Cybersecurity with Tom Lambotte.
We've had, clients who had this happen before we started working with them. And they told me in a law firm with 8 people, he told me they lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. The phone just stopped ringing. And the most important thing that you're building, one of the biggest things that people value is the depth of expertise and the reputation. And having to send out a letter like that to your clients, making a public notice of it is just, it's a death blow for many firms.
Out of this is it's not just enough to be aware. You're going to have to be putting up active defenses. Having your simple password isn't going to be enough. You can't afford to have your systems go down like this. So you need to be defending yourself because you can't afford to go down like this.
I think of all the ways that someone in a firm, anyone from your intake team to a paralegal to an associate to the owner, founder, that they could accidentally share sensitive info, let alone if a bad actor got a hold of your stuff, the damage it could wreak just could truly take your business down and drag your reputation down with it. And there's just no reason not to have these security measures in place.
Exactly. It's no different than having a lock on your front door and the deadbolt on the inside. Yep. It's just expected at this point.
Next up, episode 76, Reimagining Your Workplace for the New Normal with Anthony Davies.
What we're seeing is that work flexibility is no longer a perk. It's exactly as you say. It's a table stake. But we're also seeing many of our clients still recognize the importance of collaboration, in-person mentorship, and the role that the office plays in that.
This episode ended up going in directions that I didn't really see when we were coming into it. And really what we get out of it is everybody's struggling with this. Just because you're a small firm, it doesn't mean you're not dealing with some of the problems that are being faced by the gigantic megacorp firms that are out there. Mm-hmm. We're all trying to adjust to this. We're looking for how to make sense of this. Now, in our firm, we are a hybrid firm. I go into the office 2 to 3 days a week. Bobby, you've been remote the entire time you work for me. We're not planning on you ever coming in the office. It's going to be different for different people, and it all depends on where you're situated and what you need done. Ours is a firm that will always have a physical presence by the very nature of the practice. And there's a friend of mine who's a tax attorney who literally lives down the street from me, who almost certainly will never have an office if he could get away with it. I also can imagine a practice where you don't have to show up anywhere to have clients meet you. You can do everything virtually, and that'd be totally fine.
Mm-hmm. And again, when you look at it from your employee side, employees of a huge mega firm want most of them want the same things that employees of a small firm want, and they want these degrees of flexibility with their work, and it's the expectation now. And I think you have to really take a look at your situation and see how you can adapt to that. Okay, so the next 4 episodes that we're going to discuss are really focused on your business operations. Everything from your sales to marketing to growth. First up, it's episode 72, Growth Strategies Without Going Crazy with David Heinemeier Hansson.
To me, that is so much about like, why do we do entrepreneurship? Why do we start our own companies? Is because we want some autonomy. We want some say in what we do, because otherwise, like, is it really then that different from just having any other job, right? I think sometimes the stresses and the risks that come with starting and running a business have to be paid back in that level of autonomy. That we get to do things and say things and be things that, like, I can, to my core, feel like this is right. We're doing that and we're not doing it another way. And we will accept those trade-offs.
This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this interview. Now, we use Basecamp. David's company makes Basecamp. We get better Basecamp every day. And thankfully, I didn't turn this into a Basecamp explanation podcast. It really was on the strategy behind not having just an insane pace and crazy work all the time. I mean, looking back at when I was at the hotel, were there days when things were crazy? Yes. Were there days when things were super slow? Yes. It all was driven by who was coming in and kind of what was happening around us, and not coming from the call was not coming from inside the house. The craziness was generated by the fact that, well, you run a hotel, you have a bar, and sometimes people drink too much in the bar late at night, and then things happen. So it comes down to, you want to look at what's the insanity that's being generated within your firm. How can you get rid of that? How can you minimize it? Because you're looking for ultimately more production and less waste on things that don't help. How can you make it easy for everybody inside the firm to get their job done? And you do that by figuring out what actually needs to get done and really deleting the things that are just waste.
Yep. And I mean, on a macro level, we talk about that so much here. We talk about really streamlining your operations, and we talk about processes a lot, because that makes things easier. That makes your life less crazy, more sane. I think we were talking about earlier, I think it's important for us to have these non-lawyer perspectives in this, to take a step back and go, okay, how do you as a business owner really need to function, and what other ways can you be thinking about this?
Right. Too often I hear lawyers adopting terminology from Silicon Valley and startups. We're poised for exponential growth. We don't need to worry about that. Again, we get into this in the interview more, but focus on the growth that's right for you. You may not necessarily need to be poised for we're poised to just rocket to the moon. Sure, you can, but is that the best use for you? Keep your goals in line, and then you're focused. You're not spending so much energy about, I didn't hit 90% growth quarter over quarter. Everything's still good. And so it comes down to, a few of these interviews we had that kind of lump into the perspectives group, where it's important to get perspectives from outside of legal on this, because we don't have it all. I'd love to say I knew everything, but honestly, my brain's not big enough to put it all in there. So I love hearing from these outside perspectives of people who really have managed to keep it all in perspective.
Yep. And as much as we wanted this to be a Basecamp productivity episode, we'll have to get that from somebody else over at Basecamp. Next up, episode 74, Optimizing for Google My Business with Paul Cashman and Wes Lungwitz.
The higher up you are, the more leads you can get, the better leads you get, because you show up before all the other attorneys, and it's also a direct reflection of your business. It's going to be the first thing they see when they're looking for you, and hopefully last. They call right away.
This was a surprise breakout episode. What I found was a few of you were nice enough to share the episode online, and I would like to say thank you. Continue to do that. The more we get heard, That obviously helps us spread what we're talking about.
Please do.
But beyond that, just recognizing that Google is going to be your business partner for a long time. They're not going anywhere. You do need to play along with their rules. But while you need to play along with their rules, it doesn't mean you need to worry about everything being super optimized. So much of it comes down to basic blocking and tackling, doing the simple things right first before you worry about, well, are there secret hidden codes in my photos that may or may, be picked up? The bar is so low on some of this marketing stuff that you can really get way, way ahead of people just by doing some simple little things.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing they mentioned was make sure that your address and phone number and name of your business are correct on there, which crazy that they, as experts in this, have to tell every single person that, but that literally is where the bar is. And as somebody who, I help out with some of the intake stuff at our firm, and I see how much traction we get from Google My Business alone every day. This is important, and this is a thing that people need to be paying attention to. Next up, episode 75, Perfecting Your Holistic Sales Process with Allison Williams.
If you approach your consultation process really as a sales conversation, what a lot of lawyers think of and when they hear sales is something very different than what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about convincing the person or pushing the person or pressuring the person to say yes to you. It is really about exploring their problem in a way that leads them to see that you are a solution so that they can reach that conclusion on their own. And the more you build out a process for doing this, the more you are very strategic in the questions that you ask, the way that you hold them accountable to the answers that they're giving, the way that you educate them about what could happen if they don't solve their problem, if they're not aware of that for themselves, and how you ultimately are going to offer a solution that's more advantageous to them than either doing nothing or going somewhere else where they're not going to get as good an experience. You are ultimately doing them a service, whether they hire you or not.
This was a lot of fun too. And what I really liked is, my ego demands to be stroked, and it's nice to have Allison come in and basically verify that what we do in our firm is the right thing. And joking aside, it really is, how do we build rapport with new clients in a way that they're not going to get sticker shock, and we can kind of gently bring them on before the full engagement. We don't have to jump straight to, oh my God, hourly billing at this rate with unlimited hours in sight. We can bring people on, have a limited scope engagement to figure out what's going on, what do they need, and then take them forward from there. What it's doing is it brings the stress down on the whole situation. When you first talk to somebody, you're not trying to sell them into a $45,000 engagement. You're trying to sell them into an initial strategy session for $300, a 1-hour meeting, a 5-hour research project, something that's small and can give them a taste of working with you that's comparatively low stakes, but makes sense for both sides. Again, making it easy for everybody to get the work done.
Yeah, I mean, I just loved how she broke it down into two parts, like separating intake from consultation, where these don't have to be the same thing and shouldn't even be done by the same people. And once again, we come back to our processes and how often we hammer home on, like, have a process, have your process in place, make sure it's well oiled, like, keep reiterating it. And sales process is absolutely no different. Next up, episode 77, Utilizing Webinars to Land Your Ideal Clients with Paul Yokabitus.
The sort of rapport and just the presence of being in person adds a lot of value to it in and of itself that you really have to over deliver to compensate for on a webinar platform. You're still there live, but it's not in person. There's not the proximity element of it. So you have to deliver that much more value to be able to keep someone's attention. There's also obviously the reality that when you're engaging in a webinar, you're probably in a room that has other distractions in it, as opposed to being in a presentation room where you're pretty much just focused on the presenter. And so you have to do things throughout that maintain engagement over webinars that you don't on an in-person presentation.
This was another great technical explanation. We were getting in the weeds on how to do things. Looking at our firms, you might think, oh, well, John was doing this just to figure out how to do webinars. And sure, I was interested in that But we haven't started doing webinars. I know from talking to other friends who have set up online courses, they've had mixed success with that. Not everything is going to work for everybody. And when you start putting together what makes sense, both with Paul's episode and Allison's episode, there are a lot of good ways to put your firm together. And if you think about it, it's like an initial consult or a webinar. They're both easy ways in for people to figure out, are you a good fit for them? You're not asking them to plunk down 10 grand just to get started on, maybe it'll work. Make it easy, small bites, low risk.
Yeah. And to bring it back to client service, we talk about using these webinars to land your ideal client. And when you're attracting the best possible clients to your firm, and they sit through your webinar and they know that you're the right fit for them, then you know that you have a good client on your hands, and that alone is going to make your life better and their life better.
Right. We want the clients we work best with, and it's something that comes up. I use this story all the time. I've listed my dogs on the website as employees because it's a good way of weeding out people who aren't going to be good fits because they don't think that's serious enough for an attorney. And it's a good way to signal to the clients who will get along with us, hey, I'm not going to be a stick in the mud attorney who's going to be boring. I mean, well, maybe I'll be boring if you ask me some technical tax questions, but
no,
I've got a sense
boring? Never, John.
It's a white knuckle ride, always. But it's giving them a sense of how we're going to work and what's going to go on. And if you don't like it, that's fine. There are plenty of other options. I'm not the only one here in town, and I couldn't have every client for estate planning in town. Where would I put them?
Get the right ones. Get them in your door. Okay, last up, I'll call our Potpourri category. We had a real departure, a real change of pace this last week, where we did our very first 5-star counsel coaching session with our friend Greg Steele.
I've known Greg for a couple years now. He and I are on a regular Slack board and text thread, but it was still fun to have him come in and just kind of work through a specific issue. Now, in a future episode, we're going to go through a little bit more of what how I think about this. What's the way of kind of driving down to get to how do we improve your service? And there are a few kind of standard questions. Again, it's not magic. It's just something I figured out. But it's all there for us. Everybody's going to have a different answer, and that's okay. The point of these calls is for people to hear this is what works for somebody else. It may work for you. It's not a prescription of you have to do it Greg's way or you have to do it John's way, but it's a way of looking at the way you're set up now. How can you make it better for you, your employees, and your clients?
Yeah. How do you answer those questions that John asked Greg? Do you have answers for those questions? Where's there room for improvement? And speaking of questions, if you have more questions for us, we would love to hear them from you. We're going to be doing a special Q&A episode that may be recurring coming up. If you've got questions you want John to tackle, please email them to us. You can email it to john@fivestarcounsel.com, or you can tweet it to us, find us on social. And likewise, if you are interested in doing what Greg did and having a live on the air consultation with John, let us know. We're going to make this a recurring format going forward. Well, I think that just about does it for our wrap up here. That's episode 70 through 79. We appreciate you listening. As always, like, share, follow us on social, and follow us on your favorite podcast listening service.
Thanks so much for listening. You can find more info on us and get your free white paper on client service at 5starcounsel.com. You can get in touch with me at john@5starcounsel.com. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe wherever fine podcasts are found and leave us a review wherever you can.